This is not a bad gun. This is not a bad gun. I'm smashing that in right here before too many people freak out about the title and thumbnail of the video. I can and will totally explain the logic behind it, and yes, I really do mean it. It's not clickbait. It's just that I haven't so far seen any other creators mention what I'm going to say, which is a little confusing to me. So there's a new weapon in Battlefield 5 that released with this week's Tides of War via the weekly challenges, the Karabin 1930M. And I'll just be calling it the Karabin for this video. It's a new semi-auto for the assault class, and no, we probably didn't desperately need another one of these. And that will come into our overall discussion soon. But a new gun is a new gun, and it's always great to have new things to unlock and experience. It keeps things fresh. So big yay on that front. And as I said, it's not a bad gun. In fact, it's a good gun. A gun I've really enjoyed using so far. In fact, in my first full game using it, I spawned just a tad late, had a very quiet period at one point in the middle of the game, and still dropped 50 plus kills with it unupgraded. So I'm by no means bashing what this weapon is capable of. It's very potent in the right hands. As ever for these kind of videos that I produce, the clips aren't cherry picked at all to make myself nor the weapon look good. I'm just showing what my experience of using the weapon has been so far, and thus what it's like when I, or someone who plays like me, uses it. So it's the most accurate representation of what it's capable of that I can give you. So the basics. The Karabin is a slower firing, higher damage semi-auto. It has a rate of fire of 300 rounds per minute. As a point of reference, the slowest firing semi-auto is the Selbstlader 1916 with a rate of fire of 225, unless it has trigger job applied, which boosts it to 257, still making it the slowest firing in the game. And for this video, we'll be using the Selbstlader example without trigger job. And the fastest firing are the M1A1 and the AGM/42, both firing at 450 RPM. So with the Karabin positioned at the slower end of the firing stats, it's obviously balanced out by having pretty high damage. You're looking at a 3-bullet kill in the vast majority of situations, which is nice and consistent. And of course, a 2-shot headshot kill is a very welcome capability. Then for the reload, well, you don't have a magazine, so you'll be loading the rounds individually aside from when a 5-round stripper clip is viable. So a worthwhile comparison here is with the aforementioned Selbstlader 1916, that being the slowest firing semi-auto, remember. Well, the Karabin outperforms it for overall lethality due to them both being capable of 3-shot body shot kills and 2-shot headshots, whilst the Karabin fires 75 rounds per minute faster. And this really does make a massive difference. In a straight up 1v1 at say mid-range, between equally able players, the Karabin user has a comfortable advantage. The balancing factor for this being the obvious. The Selbstlader is more forgiving due to having 26 rounds available per reload, which also means it's much more capable of taking down multiple enemies without a reload, and it reloads with a magazine rather than having to load rounds individually or with stripper clips. And therefore, at the other end of the spectrum, the Karabin is generally lacking when up against the faster firing semi-autos at close range, especially with the AGM/42 still having that 2-shot headshot potential. But at range, the Karabin is superior, except for the AG also having a 2-shot headshot at any range. Honestly, the AGM-42 is a wildly underrated and underused weapon. It's my favourite assault gun, and although not easy to use for most people, it's damn worth getting used to. Absolutely deadly. But back to the point at hand. The Karabin is basically one of those weapons that bridges the gap between the extreme options at either end of a weapon archetype. It sits in the comfortable middle ground, doing most things pretty well, not having all that significant weaknesses, but also not being a min-max option for optimal performance for a set playstyle. It's a versatility pick. And you may say, well, that all sounds fine then. You've laid out how it's balanced and what its role is in the game. Why are you saying it's pointless? Well, it's because we haven't yet made the comparison with a specific semi-auto that's also available and has been since the release of Battlefield 5, the Gewehr 43. Here are the in-game stats for both the Karabin and the Gewehr 43 using the same specializations. You may now be starting to see my point appearing. Those stat bars are extremely similar. The rate of fire is also the same. The ammo count is the same. I can tell you that they both reload with individual rounds or stripper clips, and neither of them offer a short-range scope option. They are extremely close to being clones. The new weapon is almost a replica of one of the original weapons from release. So you may then say, well fine, just don't don't use the same specialization combinations then? Use the different options they have available. And that would be great, but here's the problem. Let me show you the specialization trees. Karabin on the left, Gewehr 43 on the right. They are literally the same aside from one specialization, quick reload or detachable magazines, so that means they're both reload focused specs, both focused upon speeding it up. Starting to really see what I'm saying now? They are so close to being the same weapon. If anything, where the Spec Trees are concerned, the Gewehr 43 just invalidates the Karabin, as detachable magazines is straight up better than quick reload. The only real thing of value here is that you could maybe set up one for hipfire and one for ADS if we were desperately looking for some sort of value in having both of them, but if that were the case, then we'd be supporting having a replica of each gun in the game, basically having two of each gun, which I'm sure we don't want. Now, I wanted to make sure of my points. I wanted to ensure I wasn't going mad and hadn't missed something, so I got in touch with Dan Minigun, link to his channel in the description. And please notice this here, when I messaged him, I really did try to avoid being anything but positive in this video. I'm not trying to complain at all, but alas, Dan checked the very detailed values of the gun on a web source and linked me to it as well, and basically, I'm right. Unfortunately, they're nearly the same gun, and I wanted to be wrong, which sucks in my opinion, not really the result I was hoping for. Now, there must be something to balance it out, right? Well, yes, a bit. Not really enough to warrant having the Karabin and the Gewehr 43 if you ask me, but there is something. The Karabin has a better upwards recoil stat, as far as we can make out, standing at 1.44 rather than 1.55 for the Gewehr 43, and that can make a difference. Not so much on PC, where recoil is much less of a factor, and yes, that leans even further into my concept of this being a pointless addition, but on console, it's more noticeable. That said, still not really enough, and with the specializations designed for aiming down sight equipped, it becomes a bit of a non-factor again. I guess what I'm saying is that for the vast majority of people, this is a pretty pointless addition where performance is concerned. But there are upsides, that this is another weapon option, even if, well, it's also kinda not. There is a positive for those who don't realize it's almost a replica of another gun. Perception can be powerful, and people may actually feel more comfortable with this than the Gewehr 43 for no reason other than placebo, or I guess nocebo, depending upon how you look at it, and I am included in that. I do prefer the Karabin just based on aesthetics and those untangibles, although in performance terms they really don't amount to anything. And for a very small percentage, the faster reload spec and the somewhat different vertical recoil will see this be a welcome addition for a few people, as it will just fit their preferences, although there won't be a great number of these individuals. But do I overall think it's worth having the Karabin and the Gewehr 43? Not really, even if they are slightly different. Much like I don't particularly see the point in having the Sten and the MP40. Yes, they are slightly different, and yes, I did used to like them both being in the game, but now I see it as a bit of a waste from a variety standpoint. You may prefer the Sten, or you may prefer the MP40, but if one was taken out of the game, would it be a big deal? For the vast majority of players, no. And I feel it's the same story for the Karabin and the Gewehr 43. I feel like if everyone was aware of this information, nobody would really be excited about getting another version of the Gewehr 43 that's just a tad different. It's kind of a wasted opportunity for adding variety. I would have supported the base stats being a bit more different from each other, or perhaps having different spec combinations possible, or maybe even a new specialization for the Karabin, something we haven't seen before. Now, some of these options are hard to implement with semi-autos in this game without them becoming overpowered or underpowered due to how gunplay design for Battlefield 5 is, as Dan pointed out to me, but something really needed to be done for this weapon. Difficult or not, the end result isn't particularly positive, as I've laid out to you. But I did still have fun with this weapon because obviously it's still a good gun. And if you want to get back to the Karabin itself, if you intend to use it regardless, here's more of a breakdown for you. Pacing your shots will see you get the most out of this weapon. Allow the sight to settle back when possible and make those bullets count. You only need to land 2 or 3, but it does still give you the opportunity to somewhat spam at close range, or if you just need to land 1 bullet for a kill on a weak enemy. Both the pacing and the spamming options are then more extreme on PC, as recoil is far easier to control, so generally, firing faster and maintaining accuracy is more possible. Now, the reload isn't as bad as you might expect, due to those stripper clips for loading 5 rounds at a time when possible, but you will be punished by this gun if you have a habit of reloading after firing a bullet or 2 without having checked your surroundings or being near cover. If you want to speed up the reloading, then you could go for quick reload, but the increase is only 15% and it does pale in comparison to, say, detachable magazines, which the Gewehr 43 has. But I don't use either of those specs on the Karabin or the Gewehr 43 because it locks you into the hipfire spec for that same side. Personally, I'm not looking to use a semi-auto such as this for hip firing, but if you do like to do that, or you have a tendency to rely upon it at close range, then the hipfire spec is a good idea, as I did find I wasn't picking up kills with hipfire in certain situations when I simply couldn't understand how the bullets could possibly miss. And for the sight, I used a 3x or medium range scope. This is something I'm sure many of you are used to seeing on semi-autos in this game, and I'm no different from the vast majority of other players in that regard. And with that all pulled together, the Karabin is a good solid weapon, it's fun to use for the right player and can do good work, but it's also kind of a pointless addition for the vast majority of players, and I think that's a shame. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, it takes literally no effort to turn on those notifications to stay up to date, as subscriptions are pretty unreliable now, but I'd also obviously appreciate if you'd like, subscribe, and join my Discord server in the description and my pinned comment. Here's the board of awesome for the epic people who support the channel on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes and I love them all deeply and of course often. If you want to join them on the board of awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and my pinned comment. And with that all said, I'm GetGoodGuy and I'll see you next time. Laters.